Anime Defenders is a game that you definitely know, but probably don't love anymore, as it has taken an incredible fall from grace and is currently sitting at a 20th of what its usual player count was upon release. And as someone who started off their channel making Anime Defenders videos, I felt as if it was only right that I give it the proper send-off it deserves on this channel by documenting every single update this game has had, all the way from update 1 to present day, reminiscing, figuring out what went wrong, looking at everything in retrospect, and with all that out of the way, let's get this started. May 26th, 2024 was the day that Anime Defenders released to the public, and it is safe to say that this game was an immediate success off launch, releasing with 50,000 concurrent players on its first day on the platform. Originally, the game was pretty bare bones, to say the least, at least in comparison to what we have now. We had our roster with 2 secrets, that being Hakari and Sungjin Woo. We had some story mode maps, and we had some mythic units which would later get double evolutions, but we will get into that later in the video. As of right now, the game didn't have too many glaring issues, with the trading economy still being relatively new and players finding their footing. There really was nothing to complain about for the release of the game. The models did look a little bit goofy, but this issue with the models would only get worse over time, as release was probably the closest that we ever got to true to the source material units in Anime Defenders. And will they be able to keep up this trend of keeping the player base happy? Well, only time will tell. Let's get into the next one. On June 3rd, we got Update 1 for Anime Defenders. Only 8 days after the game released, we already had our first update. Things were looking up for Anime Defenders. And this update introduced a new game mode, that being the new raid. It also gave us 2 new units, although it was more than 2. The only notable ones were 2, and that is Bear King and Igris. Igris was a new limited secret unit that was within the limited banner, and Bear King was a raid unit. Both of these units would go on to still be incredibly meta for basically anything in the game for a very, very long time. To give you some context, these units came out in Update 1, and in Update 9, 8 updates later, Igris can still be used to beat the entirety of any new piece of content the game has released with. And Bear King can probably also solo if you know what you're doing, but he is still viable in any new piece of content. That is how good they were, and they continue being that good. This update also saw a huge increase in player base, from their 50k on release to over 200,000 concurrent players on the release for Update 1. So once again, things were looking like they were on a steady rise, at least for the time being. Now, what was wrong with this update? Is there really anything too bad that we can say about it? Currently, no. We were still in that honeymoon phase of the game where everything was new and shiny, and they could basically add anything into the game and we would have eaten it up, just because there was quite literally not that much in the game. Keep in mind, this is Update 1, so there's still a lot of more content, units, and game modes to be added, so we were happy with anything we could get. And honestly, this was a pretty solid update, all things considered. We got an entirely new game mode to grind, really strong units that were only there for a limited time, which increased FOMO, made people play the game even more than they already were. So, like I said, we were still in that phase of the game where everything was new and fresh, everything was nice, and there were really no major complaints about Update 1. With all that being said, let's move on to the second update and see how that went. On June 16th, we received Update 2 for Anime Defenders. This update gave us a whole new raid map, as well as some other changes, such as wrap values being added into the trading plaza, some quality of life changes. We also got some new story modes, and we got yet another limited banner with insanely good units. The insanely good unit in question is Gojo, or the Rift Sorcerer. This character was a secret unit within the limited banner, and he would go on to become meta for quite literally everything in the game forever. Well, maybe not forever, but he would go on to be one of the best units that could solo anything up until Update 9. Similar to Igris, he was just insanely good until the game's death, so I'm going to count that as forever. And we did get some other notable additions. We got some good support units. We got, what was her name? Ice Dragon Queen, I believe. My memory's a little bit hazy. We got her. We got Megumi. Well, he was supposed to look like Megumi. Beast Sorcerer. And besides the new units, this was a W update. Once again, the player count soared to new heights during Update 2. Once again, cementing Anime Defenders as a game that was here to stay, at least for now at least. We don't know about what's going to happen later on, but overall, people were happy with this update once again. It seems like they were going on a pretty good streak of updates, adding content that people wanted to play, as well as pleasing their community by giving them something to actually grind towards. Now, that does not mean that this update was free of faults. One major thing that was a pretty shitty addition in my opinion was the fact that you had to pay a certain amount of robux to be able to do trades now. Actually, in the background footage right now, I think Nag is going to go into the trade hub and actually look at that. So yeah, we'll just wait for him to do that real quick. Makes it easier for me. I don't have to edit the video. But hold on, he's going to do it pretty soon. Wait for it. Wait for it. It's almost there. Okay, yeah, there we go. Limits. 13 booth sales. And if you look, it's tied to the amount of Robux that you spend. And although, you know, 100, 1,000, 1,000 plus Robux to get unlimited trades isn't that bad, like, because it tracks across how much Robux you spent on the entire game as a whole, it is just a shitty addition. Because not only do you ostracize your free-to-play players by forcing them to either have a limited amount of trades or cough up money, you don't really stop bot accounts. Because although the point of this was to have measures in place to stop the botting problem that was plaguing the game, Update 2 is when people really started noticing, hey, this game has hella bots, and it might fuck up the game's economy later on, or just ruin the experience for the normal player. Which they were absolutely right, so Anime Defenders, the team behind Anime Defenders, added stuff like a CAPTCHA where you have to type in some letters in order to play a game mode, or added stuff like the trading changes where you could only do a certain amount of trades every day unless you spent X amount of Robux. Both of these changes, although somewhat circumvented, they made alting more annoying, but they didn't stop it. And to the people that were running 40 accounts at once, black marketing units and selling everything online, it put absolutely zero stop to them, and it really only served to make the quality of life worse for the average player. But with all that out of the way, let's move on to Update 3, and something tells me this one is not that great. Holy shit. On June 30th, just 14 days after Update 2 released, we got Update 3, aka the Day of Reckoning, aka widely received as one of the worst, if not the worst update that this game has ever received. And it's not bad for what you might think it is. It wasn't due to a lack of content or lazy direction, but rather it was the way that you obtained this new content, in air quotes, that pissed a lot of people off. But before I get into that, let's talk about what was actually added. We got some new units within the banner, 1 secret, 3 mythical, 1 legendary. We got a new Hall of Mirrors game mode. We got new story mode maps and a whole new exclusive wish banner. Now, I am listing a lot of new things, new game mode, hella new units. In fact, we got an entirely new banner this update, so what is there exactly to complain about? Well, the reason this update is widely regarded as one of the worst updates this game has ever received is due to how blatantly monetized this update was. It was deemed the 5.7 years update by a lot of YouTubers as well as the community because to obtain the units that anyone actually cared about, Shadow Dragon, Legion Commander, the 2 main good units from the exclusive banner, you either had to mortgage your house or you could spend 5.7 years playing Hall of Mirrors to statistically earn it for free without spending money. And This update was just an absolute train wreck of biblical proportions. Oh my goodness. Words cannot describe the reception to this on release. In fact, to this day, I'm pretty sure my most popular video ever was me documenting the absolute vitriol and hate that the community spewed that day, and for good reason, right? They did revert some of these changes later on, although it was still a fundamentally flawed system. On release, it was just absolutely ridiculous. Wishes barely dropped from the new Hall of Mirrors game mode. People played Hall of Mirrors a couple times and then quit for two reasons. Number one, the game mode was just too time consuming and difficult for the reward that it gave. And number two, it was just boring. Like, people did not want to sit there. Okay, I'll give them some credit where they deserve. Hall of Mirrors is a pretty novel concept. In a vacuum, I've said this before and I'll say it again. In a vacuum, Hall of Mirrors is probably the best game mode Anime Defenders has ever added into their game, and probably the best piece of standalone content that they've ever put inside of the game. Because a game mode that is long forces you to strategize and has multiple lanes which enemies can come through at the same time, which slowly scale more and more until the entire map has, like, I don't know how many, I think it's 10, 12, like just like a bunch of lanes all intersecting into your base. That is an incredibly neat and novel concept, albeit I don't think they came up with this idea. I don't think they pioneered having a tower defense game with multiple lanes. It's the first time that I've ever seen it in a Roblox anime TD, and I think it was executed beautifully. I had a lot of fun experimenting and learning how to solo nightmare mode of Hall of Mirrors by myself with no secrets and as just pure free-to-play units. That was genuinely fun because it forced you to think. Now, obviously, people that had almighty secrets just, plop your unit down, turn your brain off, but what I'm trying to say is that game mode in a vacuum was incredibly good. And to this day, I think Hall of Mirrors is an incredibly good game mode, but the rewards for it are just, the juice is not worth the squeeze, which is exactly why people didn't like the game mode on release, and they probably don't like it now. At the time that I'm making this video, Hall of Mirrors is a dead game mode. No one is playing Hall of Mirrors. Well, no one's really playing Anime Defenders right now either, but you get what I'm trying to say. People played Hall of Mirrors for maybe a day or two before they quickly got bored of it, and the novelty of spending 30 minutes in a single stage for jack shit rewards started to wear off. And another reason why it was hated, I think I listed off all the main bullet points here. Extremely pay to win, the monetization was just off the charts, the only quote-unquote free-to-play methods of obtaining the new content were a slap in the face at best and downright sinister at worst. And I think that wraps it up for Update 3. This was an absolute monumental landmark of an update, not only because it was so hated, but I also farmed a lot of views during that time. Like I said, my most viewed video was people hating on Update 3. In fact, I think that was the video that got me content creator role in the Anime Defenders Discord, because they saw that video and they're like, oh shit, you exist. Here, you can have the role. And that was cool. That was nice of them. It makes me happy that they can take criticism without just lashing out at the people saying it. At the same time, much of the criticism that was said within Update 3 was sort of fixed. I'd call them band-aid fixes because we never really got to the root of the issue. To this day, Shadow Dragon is, well, obviously now he's extremely hard to get because he's unobtainable. Even back then, a free-to-play player that wasn't grinding with 20 ults was never going to get a Shadow Dragon in a reasonable amount of time. And it was just, man, that update, Update 3 is widely known as one of the worst updates, and for good reason. Let's move on to Update 4. Update 4 was split into two parts, Part 1 and Part 2. Update 4 Part 1 came out on July 14th, and Part 2 came out a week after on July 21st. But let's go over what came out in Part 1 before we get into Part 2. So, Update 4 Part 1 had a Hall of Mirrors rework, with the game's duration being reduced and the wish rates were buffed. We also got a new change to wishes with the addition of Divine Wishes. Basically made it so Divine Wishes were the pay-to-win version, normal wishes were the free-to-play version. We got a new battle pass, and we got portals. Now, portals were an absolutely incredible addition to the game. It is a well-known thing amongst the community that portals were one of the things that they did right within this game, Everyone loved portals. So we got 3 new types of portals with 3 new secret units, and you can see it on the screen, all the other miscellaneous bullet points. We also got spirits in part 1 of update 4, and to this day, spirits have been a really nice addition to the game. Barring some of the bugs that they've caused, which are still not fixed, spirits were a really good addition to the game. It just added a little extra layer of strategy, sort of like having sub-traits, if that's the best way that I can describe it, and it was free-to-play friendly. Obviously, you could just shell out some money and get a bunch of spirit orbs to get whatever spirit you wanted, but every spirit was sort of good in its own right, and the super duper good spirits weren't even incredibly rare. For example, Golden Spirit, a spirit that buffs the income of your unit by 50%, absolutely meta for farm units. This was a common spirit. You could get this in a couple summons with spirit orbs, so there was really nothing to worry about. There was no huge pay to win aspect. Update 4 Part 2 had a little bit less content than Update 4 Part 1, well, I'd say considerably less, but we did get some things worth noting. Number 1, Lucky Tickets. This was a new limited currency that players could use to summon 4 in a new limited banner. This new limited banner had 1 secret, 1 mythical, 1 legendary, 1 epic, and 1 rare. We also got 2 new portal types with 2 new secrets, and the only other notable addition to the game was the fact that they buffed Igris, aka the Cursed Knight, making him, to this day, one of the best units to ever touch this game. He used to be a ground-only unit, and then they turned him into a hybrid, so that basically eliminated the only weakness he ever had. So now he was just a hybrid, full AoE unit that has a debuff passive and a nuke ability. So yeah, he trivialized the entire game. Update 4, Part 2, and Part 1 respectively were relatively well received, all things considered. Yeah, some people were miffed about the things with wishes, more specifically how divine wishes were just outright pay to win, and normal free-to-play wishes were still pretty shitty in terms of RNG and actually being able to obtain Shadow Dragon or, insert new exclusive wish banner unit. But portals, I'd say the addition of portals and spirits made the community more happy than they were displeased. So Update 4 as a whole, including Part 1 and Part 2, was a success. Will they be able to keep up this momentum, or will the game start going on a downhill decline? Let's go into Update 5 and find out. August 24th, 2024, we received Update 5 Athenix's Realm, and this update did take a little longer to come out than usual. I believe it was a little over a month. It was jam-packed with a lot of new content. We got a new world, or new realm, called Athenix. We got a new enemy type, burrow units, which were just glorified tanks. They could only take damage from ground units initially, but this change was later reverted, so they would be able to take damage from all units. We had a new trial, or new trials, which were just banners, 3 new banners, a new battle pass, we had new Athenix challenges, new story mode, new infinite challenge mode, and new realm items. The infinite challenge mode was actually a pretty neat and novel concept, I liked that. And the new realm items, most of them, you didn't use them too much. Things like the Athenix tether were needed if you wanted to take your units from World 2 back into the main game. Limit Breaker let you get 10 more levels on your unit, which was pretty useful for mid-maxers, but I never found myself using it too much. Number 1, because Limit Breakers were oppressingly annoying and difficult to obtain. The only real guaranteed way to get it was through the battle pass, and if you didn't do that, you just had to keep banging your head and hoping you got the super rare drop of a Limit Breaker, or run 20 accounts at once and trade all of them to your main. Player count wise, things were still looking pretty good for anime defenders. They reached a peak of 234,000 players upon the release of Update 5, which were very high numbers by any standard on any Roblox game. Albeit a lot of those quote-unquote players were bots because of a huge problem that was plaguing the game at the time, and even before then, was the fact that people were ulting the game. They were playing on alt accounts to progress faster, to get gems faster, to get units faster, and this became the norm, which is the reason that Update 5 was as negatively received as it was. Number 1, there was an entirely new currency that you needed to use to summon for the 3 banners. This pissed a lot of people off because it essentially made gems useless within Update 5. And whenever you make a long-standing currency that players have been grinding for updates now, When you make that basically useless for all of the new content in an update, it was obviously going to piss some people off. Now, besides the alternative currency, the evo requirements for a lot of these new units were painstakingly time consuming. Even if you were alting the game, you couldn't trade the new evo materials anyway, so it felt like it was just a time sink for the sake of having a time sink. I understand the philosophy of wanting players to take their time earning the new units and new evolutions within the update, because if they just made it so you could snap your fingers and get everything within a day, people would get bored and complain, but I honestly don't think this was the way to do it. The current system that we had in Update 5 for evolving any of your new units was just to grind out challenges every single hour. There really was not much else to do. There was no different game modes, there was no gold shop, there was no nothing. And as someone that was playing on a singular account during Update 5, I remember it taking me days to evolve a single unit, because I wasn't going to sit here and put an hourly timer to grind out every challenge 24/7. I was just going to do challenges whenever I was playing the game. And the way that they set up this new system, well, it's not a new system, but just in the way which this system was set up for Update 5, it was really oppressive to players with a single account, and it was yet another reason why people had a lot of gripes with Update 5. If I had to pinpoint it, I would say that Update 5 was the beginning of the end for anime defenders, because although they would go on to maintain hundreds of thousands of players in the subsequent updates, a lot of those players were, once again, not actually players, and if you look at the trends, it was just a downhill decline ever since Update 5. You can really just see no spikes in players besides the updates that they would drop every now and then, but all in all, I would label Update 5 as the start of the fall off. No other update would go on to replicate the success that they found within their first initial updates, and would instead only serve to delay the inevitable demise of this game. Now, before I move on to Update 6, I will include a little tidbit here about Update 5.5, which was a smaller content update that came out on August 31st. The most notable thing that was added was 2 and 3x speed. A lot of people were complaining about the needlessly tedious length of stages, so this was able to remedy that issue pretty well. We also got mythic units buffed by 25 to 30%, as well as some miscellaneous balance changes across the board. They added a secret pity to Aethenix, like banners. There we go. I don't know why it took me so long to say that. I had a little brain aneurysm there. We got daily/weekly quest changes. We also got gem to Aethenix token conversions, 2x trait luck weekends, a new wish banner, a new battle pass to summon 50 units at once, and console support. All in all, Update 5.5 added a lot of much needed quality of life features. Overall, I would label Update 5.5 as one of their greatest updates ever, up there with the Portals update and Update 4, because the amount of quality of life changes that were just overwhelmingly positive that we got cannot be understated. Now, although this is all fine and dandy, like I said, player counts weren't exactly skyrocketing after this. Yeah, it made people happy, but like I said before, it was just a downhill slope after this, so now let's move on to Update 6. On September 15th, 2024, we received Update 6, the Double Evo update. This was also the first update that they added some content creators as planners for the game, like myself, Mr. Rhino, AB Plays, Vanilla. I believe those were the only 4 of us, correct me if I'm wrong, even I don't remember. But the content creators didn't really do any major planning for the game, and by major I mean things like game modes, mechanics, etc, etc. We mainly just planned out moves for units, and this was the first one where we actually planned out, I believe, all of the moves for the new units, besides, you know, the people that were on the planning team before us. The guys that actually had experience with that, they also did a lot, but I'm getting off topic here. Update 6 came with some quality of life changes, but the most important of which is the 6 new double evolutions for old mythic units. They were all focusing on mythic units from Update 1 because they were currently really garbage and no one was bothering to use them, so they gave them a second evolution which would boost them up in power, as well as making players incentivized to actually grind out some of the old content within the game. We also got 2 new story modes and a new Golden Knight portal. Now, the secret unit within the Golden Knight portal, Golden Boy, who evolved into Golden Adult, insanely overpowered. In retrospect, the balancing for this game was a little bit out of whack because the power creep was extremely prevalent since Update 1, because units like Igris and then Update 2 units like Gojo would go on to be the best units in the game ever, forever. To this day, we are currently in Update 6. Those two units are still better than 98% of the roster that we have available, which is crazy to think about. Golden Boy was just another addition that was extremely overpowered. They basically just gave him every single status effect in the game, as well as being full AoE. So, they just really slapped on all the best things on him, called it a day. And from a balancing standpoint, maybe that wasn't the best move. The double Evo Mythics were a relatively well-received addition from the community, with the main gripe being that it was extremely grindy to obtain the new double Mythic evolutions. There were a lot of things that could have been done better. For example, to evolve each Mythic into its double Evo form, you needed about, I don't know the exact number, but you needed some legendary and epic units that dropped from the Golden Knight portals. These were incredibly annoying to get as they weren't guaranteed, portals weren't renewable unless you had a portal hardener, and it really just left players having to grind portals over and over and over again, even if they already had all the necessary Evo materials, just because those two units that you needed to use to evolve the new Mythics was just an absolute tedious grind fest. All in all, I would label the community reception to Update 6 as neutral to lukewarm at best. And with that being said, let's move on to Update 7. Update 7, Vampire Castle, arrived on October 19th, 2024. Within this update, we got a new special banner, which had a new ancient unit, as well as a new secret farm. We had a new wish banner. We had a new raid that dropped a new secret unit. We had divine trait crystals. These were a step above the normal trait crystals that we're used to, which allowed you to get traits that were far superior to the normal ones, as well as a leaderboard season reset and some miscellaneous changes. Now, Update 7 did add a substantial amount of content, but for many, myself included, this was the beginning of the end. I know I said that for Update 5, but this was the update where a lot of people jumped ship, and the update after that only served to make things 10 times worse. Now, if I had to pinpoint what this update did wrong exactly, I'd say the fact that divine trait crystals were pay to win, that didn't help them at all. Also, the fact that the new special banner needed ancient relics, an entirely new form of currency that players have to grind for again, that didn't help them much. Looking back on it, the fact that adding a new currency pissed players off every single time it was added, I think the only time that it was somewhat positively received was back when lucky tickets were a thing. After that, in Update 5 players hated it, in this update players hated it. It just was not a recipe for success, all things considered. And Update 7, player count wise, they were able to reach a peak of 87,000 players upon the release of Update 7. And although this is pretty good by Roblox standards, having 80k players on your game for most devs would mean extreme success, you do have to keep in mind that number one, this game used to average hundreds of thousands of players. Number two, a lot of the players that are still playing this game are bot accounts or alts. So take that 87k with a grain of salt. Let's move on to Update 8, and boy, was this a doozy. On November 1st, we got Red 1, Update 8 for Anime Defenders. And the additions that we got into the game was a new exclusive raid, the Red 1 raid, the addition of elements, elemental stages, which you could use to gain skill points for your units, skill trees, and some miscellaneous changes. We also got a new unit, the Polar Bear, Garcia. You get him from the raid, I'm pretty sure. And here's the thing about this update. You can barely even call it an update. It was more of an ad than it was an update, because every single time you ran the new raid, you had to look at a little trailer of the movie Red 1. In fact, in the lobby, you can see it on the screen right now, there is a Red 1 trailer playing right now as we speak. And this update is up there with Update 3 as one of the most poorly received updates this game has ever gotten. And it was just because the game felt like an advertisement more than it felt like a game. We were also way past the point of this game even being considered an anime tower defense. It earned the nickname OC Defenders, Anything Defenders. You know, there was nothing that screamed anime about the new units that we received this update. In fact, we got a polar bear with a gun as one of our new units. I don't know what anime he's from, but you get what I'm trying to say. This update, player count wise, didn't do very well. At this point, the game was already in such a negative community standing, and so many people had given up on Anime Defenders and went over to things like Anime Reborn or Anime Vanguards, that it was just too late. I'll admit things like elements and skill trees are welcome additions that not only increase strategization but also give players an incentive to actually grind. There's a little problem with that though. Sure, you can give things for players to do, but that system fails when players aren't on the game at all. And although this game was still averaging tens of thousands of players at the time that Update 8 came out, Red 1, again, a lot of these weren't actually players, and the only real players were ready to quit any given second. And I think Update 9 really encapsulates that perfectly. Let's move on. Well, here we are in present day. Anime Defenders Update 9 released to the public on December 18th, 2024. And like I've stated in some videos before, it was more of a miss than it was a hit. We got things such as the new limited time Christmas banner, we got new Christmas maps, we got a new Santa Claus quest, a new Christmas battle pass, a gold shop, new leaderboard season, and new trading changes. So let me list out what I think was good before we get into the bad. Number 1, new units. Cool, love to see it. Gold shop, amazing. Quality of life change that I've been asking for a while. New Santa Claus quest that gives rewards, you love to see it. Now, there were so many complaints about Update 9 that if I were to add them all into this video, it would add another 15 minutes onto the already 32-minute video that it currently is. So we're just gonna skip past that and just talk about the thing that killed the game the most, and that was the trading changes. There is a new trading currency called Emerald, which was added into the game. You can only get Emerald by paying with Robux, and you need Emerald to buy anything from the trading booths. Besides game passes, you can trade game passes directly, but anything else, you know, if you want to buy a unit, buy any resource on the trading booths, then you're gonna need to shell out some money to get emeralds. Someone is gonna need to spend money to get emeralds. Sure, you can obtain them as a free-to-play if you sell your units for emeralds, but you get what I'm trying to say. This change was the nail in the coffin. Currently, the game is at like 6,000 or 7,000 players at the time that I'm making this video, and it was because trading was really the last thing that was keeping the game afloat, and they basically ruined that. Now, I know that trading is obviously still in the game, but this emerald change was so drastic and it was so late in the game's life cycle that people are just not willing to adapt to the new change, and the player count shows that pretty well. So Update 9, their latest update, the one that we're on right now, pretty much cemented this game's life cycle as complete. We had the rise, the peak, the fall off, and the death. In conclusion, Update 9 marks the end of my time with Anime Defenders, and probably a lot of other people as well. And unless you guys want to see more Anime Defenders content from me, which, judging from the comments on all of my current Anime Defenders videos, I'm assuming is a resounding no, this will probably be my last ever Anime Defenders video on the channel. And it really is just the natural life cycle of things. Roblox games come, Roblox games go, and as a content creator for these types of games, all I can do is keep moving forward and make the things that you guys want to watch. To me, Anime Defenders will always have some sentimental value to me, as it was the game that jump-started my platform on YouTube. It was the game that allowed me to grow a community in which I can voice my opinions and form long-lasting bonds with. Believe it or not, I read about 98-99% of the comments that you guys leave on the channel. Obviously, I'm not going to respond to every single one of them, but I do read almost every single one of them. And I always smile a little bit when I see familiar faces, because it really does make me happy to know that there are people out there that enjoy my content and enjoy listening to what I have to say. And if Anime Defenders never existed, this channel would have probably never been a reality. The whole reason that this channel started was because I was so passionate towards Anime Defenders. I love the game so much. I was so addicted to the game. Those feelings would later blossom into the channel that we have today. My YouTube bio still says Passion Project because that's what I treat this channel as. Now, I know that I'm known for content farming and squeezing out those 8-minute videos for that sweet, sweet ad revenue, but to this day, every single video that I make, regardless of the topic, comes from a place of genuine excitement and passion for Roblox as a whole. I am a grown man, 18 years of age, who will passionately talk about Roblox games for hours on end if given the chance. And I am eternally grateful that there are some people out there like you guys who tune into what I have to say. Anime Defenders, you had a good run, but all things must come to an end, including this video. With that all out of the way, thank you for watching. Have a great day or night wherever you are. Stay tuned for more content, and we'll catch you in the next one.